Years ago, when I first saw this window, which is located in the upper gallery on the west or Simcoe Street side of the sanctuary, I thought that the image was intended as a reference to the passage in the Gospels when Jesus takes a child in his arms and says to his disciples, "Suffer the little children to come unto me." But that was not quite accurate. Rather, and as we've noted in relation to a number of the windows in the church sanctuary, learning something about the life of the individual in whose memory the window was installed can often help us to understand the reasons for the particular images that the window contains. This window was dedicated in memory of Lieutenant Colonel Donald McGillivray, MD, who was born into a large family in Whitby, Ontario on May the 18th, 1867. Donald's father, George McGillivray, had immigrated from Scotland in 1833, first stopping in Quebec before heading down to Vermont. Shortly after, he then came back and settled in Whitby Township. George McGillivray was married to Carolyn Amelia Fothergill in 1848, and the couple would eventually go on to have 14 children, of which Donald was one of the youngest. Many of Donald's siblings went on to have very well-regarded careers, including his sister Florence Helena McGillivray, who was a renowned post-impressionist artist who was admired by and actually influenced other Canadian artists such as Tom Thompson. In 1870, Donald's parents purchased Inverland House in Whitby, where his father had become quite active in the political and business and civic life of the town. The house was later designated a heritage property. Donald joined the 34th Ontario Regiment, which was based in Whitby, in the 1880s, and in that same decade, he began his studies at the University of Toronto, finishing his medical degree and subsequently completing some postgraduate work in England. Through the 1890s, he ran a pharmacy in Uxbridge, Ontario, before moving to Toronto in 1902. After moving to Toronto, Donald worked in a number of different hospitals, including as an assistant faculty member in clinical medicine at the University of Toronto and at the Hospital for Sick Children, which is a detail that's likely to be important to remember when we look at the various images in this stained glass window. On June the 14th, 1906, Donald married Helen Georgia Nelson. From about 1913 to 1933, the couple lived at 2 Elgin Avenue in what is now known as Yorkville. The house in which they lived is still standing at the corner of Elgin Avenue and Avenue Road, and most of us have probably either driven or walked by it many times. As mentioned, Donald had been involved in the military as a younger man, as well as in medical practice. As a result, on April the 3rd, 1915, shortly after the First World War broke out, Donald enlisted to serve with the Canadian Army Medical Corps, which was somewhat unusual in light of the fact that by that time he was already 47 years old. Donald served in various places, including in England, Egypt, Greece, and Malta, where he became sick with enteritis, resulting in his return to Canada in 1917. Upon his return, he continued to serve on the Medical Examination Board until the end of the war. After the war, he practiced medicine in Toronto for many years. He and Helen were active in the St. Andrew's Church community, as were a number of members of his extended family. There are actually plaques in the sanctuary attesting to the family's long-standing connection with this community of faith, and there are descendants of the McGillivray family who are still members of this congregation today. In 1956, at 89 years old, Donald passed away, and Helen died in 1971 at the age of 94. A few years after Donald's death in 1967, this window was unveiled in his memory. At the time of its installation and dedication in 1967, the minister of the time, the Reverend Paul Sterling, wrote the following in the St. Andrew's newsletter. Reverend Sterling wrote, "March 26th was another interesting day. After the morning service, a window in the West Gallery was dedicated to the glory of God and in memory of Lieutenant Colonel Donald McGillivray, MD. The window depicts our Lord holding in his arms a sick child, the mother of whom is kneeling at his feet. The two supporting figures are a lame man with a crutch on his left and a disciple to his right rear. The colors are bright, which is almost a necessity in our church, and toning as it does with contiguous windows, a very satisfactory effect is the result. The window is the gift of Mrs. McGillivray. The dedication took place immediately after the morning service, and the congregation was asked to sit on the east side of the nave so as to be able to see. The actual unveiling was performed on behalf of his aunt by the Honorable Mr. Justice George A. McGillivray. At the bottom of the window are the words, "Jesus went about healing all manner of sickness." And along the bottom of that window are a snake wrapped around a cross, which is an ancient Greek symbol for healing and medicine called the rod of Asclepius, and may also have been intended as a reference to the biblical story when the Israelite encampment in the wilderness was infested with venomous snakes, and the Israelite leaders fashioned a bronze serpent, wrapped it around a cross, and asked the Israelites to look upon it, after which they would be saved from those snake bites. Along the other side of the window is a mortar and pestle, which were used to crush and mix medicines. Each of the main images in the window, therefore, are incredibly relevant and meaningful symbols to use in a window dedicated to the memory of a doctor, a pharmacist, a medic in the Army Corps, and a pediatrician. And the words in the window, that Jesus went about healing all manner of sickness, are also fitting in the remembrance of the life of Donald McGillivray, since he as well had gone about healing all manner of sickness in Uxbridge, in Toronto, in England, in Egypt, in Greece, during times of war and times of peace, teaching and serving in university classrooms, in battlefield hospitals, at the bedside of sick children. In those and in so many places, Donald had also used his gifts and his abilities, healing all manner of sickness. And so, to this son and brother and husband and soldier and doctor and good and faithful man, this window stands. To the glory of God and in memory of Lieutenant Colonel Donald McGillivray, M.D., born May the 18th, 1867, died September 24th, 1956, erected by his wife. He went about healing all manner of sickness.